or contract or an agreement, they should be sharing.
I think the worst part of this kind of topic is the name of the agreement itself.
Right.
Because everything else, the general terms, like bilateral relations, negotiations, trade agreements, it's sort of.
That's true.
It's the names of the agreement.
No, we can. I thought we can still do some brainstorming. It's
Yeah,
better
sure.
Oh
Not
yeah, I
doing
think, but I agree with
I
you.
agree with you.
Sometimes I would just use the same word in English if I don't know it, but then just try to explain it. Does that work? I think.
Well, it probably works in Canada.
English being,
Because
yeah.
everybody is more or less familiar
Yeah,
with English terms.
that's true. Okay, so coming back to so yeah, there's probably going to be talking bilateral agreements or plurilateral agreements, right? Multilateral, and
Treaty, multilateral treaty.
Treaties, pact,
mhm.
free trade.
Do we use the word pact talking about trade?
Yes.
Yeah. The trade pact? I mean, in
I think
general, yeah.
Like, what's the difference between pact, treaty, agreement?
A treaty is
And deal.
always like international, something international. So an agreement can be anything. So an agreement can be between two people.
Like prior to it being ratified?
No.
A treaty, if I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but a treaty is usually multilateral and not bilateral.
It's I'm not sure about that. You might be right, but it's always like if we have a business partnership, it's not a treaty. Like it's
No.
not a, like between two companies or two people. So a treaty is something more monumental, like
Between nations.
like yeah,
and
between nations.
multiple
And
nations.
it could be like post-war treaty or peace treaty or
Oh, peace treaty.
economic treaty, but it's always
Mm.
something global that involves multiple nations.
Right.
Like, you can have a treaty within a country itself, like Canada has many treaties.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, with indigenous.
But but it's again, like it's between two jurisdictions. Kind of, like,
Yeah, I'm
it's
just
not
saying
like
it doesn't have to
yeah,
be the
so
two.
Right.
it's something more.
All
And I
right.
don't know if other countries have that.
One word came up a lot in my research, which is framework.
Oh gosh, this is
Framework, my understanding is that it's one step before the formal treaty.
Oh.
So you say framework is written?
Sorry?
Oh, okay.
An outline, yeah.
Well,
But
the
it
framework,
does, that word is used a lot when
yes.
talking about
A
trade deals.
framework agreement, from what I understand, could also be that does not define specific procedures or specific steps.
Right.
But it defines a framework of doing something, like a set of guidelines.
Okay.
Yeah.
So framework is good. I mean, we will never be specialized in knowing exactly, but it's just good to know that there's different kinds of agreements or relationships. So we're just trying to activate that part. So yeah, so there's pact, treaty, agreement, framework, that will probably come up. Anything else? Any other words that you
Trade deficit.
Yeah.
Or surplus.
Mhm.
Non-tariff barriers. Well, there's tariff first, and then there's non-tariff barriers.
Okay, such as?
Health, yeah, quarantine or product quality related.
Quotas.
Yeah. Quotas and tariffs. What's the relationship?
Well,
Quotas and non-tariff.
Quota is a cap. on something.
Quota is the amount of goods or services that can be imported or exported. Tariff is a tax on the goods or that's a surcharge. Yeah. It's
There's
an
another
amount
thing
of
like
money.
tariffs versus duties versus fees
Yeah, the
versus
duties,
what
levies.
else? Duties, fees,
Levies.
tariffs, what else?
Levies,
Taxes.
tax. Those are all,
There is probably difference.
yeah. At least you have at least one way to say it. What else could come up?
Global value chain.
I love to use it, I promise.
Trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights.
Wipe it off your clusters.
Anything else? The green, the glossary.
There's a concept called comparative advantage
Mhm.
in my speech, just so everyone knows about it.
Can you explain it?
The productivity of a country producing one good divided by the cost.
Mm,
So if,
right.
if I have a comparative advantage over you in
Right.
producing computers, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm more productive than you.
Right.
It just means that in relation, relative to my cost,
Right.
I'm more productive.
It's cheaper for you to produce it.
No, actually not
Because,
in absolute terms. Not in absolute terms.
Relative.
Right.
No, no, no.
Cost effective?
Well, you can go back to your economics textbook and pick out the math, how it works, but comparative is comparative. It's not absolute. So the idea
Yeah, it's
being,
comparative to someone else.
according to Ricardo, an economist, if I have a comparative advantage over you in producing A, then I should export A
Yeah,
Good
in the
idea.
basis of free trade.
without necessarily meaning that I'm more productive in absolute terms
Yeah.
over you.
Exactly.
But
So that's why you each country would.
that's why we are both better off
specialize.
trading.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why people want to trade.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Let's talk about some of the major trade agreements out there, like
Yes.
CETA,
CETA,
TPP.
TPP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP,
I
in
think TPP
Asia.
can also call the PT.
TPP,
Isn't that a comprehensive name for it?
Trans, what is it?
It's a comprehensive. It's five letters. TPP? No.
No.
never mind.
It's
No, it's-
CPTPP.
TPP.
CPTPP,
Thank
yeah, but those are different things. There's
There's
Well, there is a
NAFTA.
world.
Which is the
USMCA.
USMCA.
Well,
Or the
previously NAFTA.
CUSMA.
CUSMA.
Or one more.
Yeah.
In Canada,
Canada,
it's C,
yeah.
USMA.
What
Mexico's
else?
N, US.
What about the ones with Asia?
And then in French.
Belt and
French,
Road.
it's can't.
The Belt and Road, yes, this is
ASEAN.
basically a,
ASEAN, yeah.
you should know it.
There are two
ASEAN.
agreements in the context of WTO. The
Mhm.
General Agreement on Tariffs
Trade.
Trade, which was the original.
GATT, yeah.
Yeah,
GATT.
and there is the General Agreement on yeah, so which is
JTS,
Yeah,
right?
on
There-
service.
What about those with Latin America or South America? Mercosur. How do you spell it?
MERCOSUR.
Right, I need that one. Is there another one that you said?
No.
No, okay. Mercosur is a big one. Is there any other ones? What's next? Well, the NAFTA. The new NAFTA.
That's not the NAFTA. No.
Customs Union.
Yeah.
CETA, TPP, NAFTA, Coastal Belt and Road, anything to do with Mercosur, Customs Unions. Any other ones? Any other organizations that may come up?
Single market.
Okay. I think that's pretty good. Okay, it's a good start. I mean, obviously there's more specific vocabulary, but for each speech we can review all of them. I have to.
But there's also Shanghai Organization of Cooperation. It's relevant to Russia.
But I thought it's military. That's a military one, not a.
Well, they have various aspects.
Right.
It was based on security, organization of cooperation.
SOC.
Okay, so let's go into our first speech then. Now that we've, activated a bit that vocabulary,
It's not
we're
10
learning
minutes,
it.
by the way.
Well, I put.
It's never 10 minutes.
How
It's
long
at
is
least- At least 20.
Okay,
25. I mean,
Can we
do you
aim
want to
for-
break it up into?
can we aim for maybe 15 to
Just
20?
By speaking notes faster.
Yeah.
Yes,
I can turn it into 10. I typed it up. I can just turn it into 10. Well, I don't like it.
I mean, no, it doesn't have to be
Let's do it.
10, but I
No.
just, knowing that sometimes you go over, no offense, you can do 15 to 20. Is that okay?
Why don't you just stop me?
Okay.
Yeah.
So
okay.
I'll
Or
just-
let you know
I'll
when
say
you're
go,
3 minutes.
and
Yeah,
you
let's
just
do
stop
Wrap up.
me.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
I copy and pasted all the words. So let's take a second to look at them. You can do so by yourself.
Or
And
you can do two parts.
if it's 15 fine, we can do all of it and go.
It's
to
about
relay.
20 minutes if you don't want me to rush. I always
Yeah.
aim at 30 minutes because that's the UN shift. So I always forget that we don't work on those curves, so my aim is always 30 minutes, and then it's a bit under. Okay,
No, it's just
fine.
because otherwise 30 minutes is good. So we have Kim, Alexi, and Reagan each take a booth, so we know where you're going to be. The rest of the languages just decide amongst yourself what you want to do. Are you going to listen? Knowing that there's 3 speeches today, if you are giving a speech, maybe go into
Alexi,
practice this one.
Would you like to do the relay for our 0 viewers on YouTube?
Sure. We're going to standard
Two?
to
Okay.
English from Chinese.
Just gonna put it.
Together, amazing, together, amazing, together.
Global. Global. Global.
Testing, testing, booth number 2, English relay, booth number 2. Testing, testing, English relay, booth number 2. Good morning. Welcome to our conference on trade agreements. I would like to discuss e-commerce in my presentation. I would also like to talk about the context, including e-commerce and international trade agreements. agreements that we either already have or agreements that are currently being developed or negotiated. First and foremost, let's talk about why e-commerce is an important subject for international trade agreements. Why should we discuss it separately, in other words? Why is it not possible to just apply the current international trade agreements? Why is it impossible to apply the existing agreements? We know that e-commerce has been developing for several decades, and now we have new social norms. We have new ways of communication between people, between companies. We have a new economy and a new way of managing businesses. So this new digital community gave rise to a whole digital economy. We now have new goods, new services, new types of business relationships, and new ways of managing businesses. As a result of having the digital economy, we have e-commerce, which should be regulated. One of the important characteristics of the digital economy is transforming knowledge and transforming economic activity into data. A lot of people and processes are interrelated. As a result, we have a constant generation of huge volumes of data. And thanks to generating, storing, and accessing data, we now have new opportunities to do business in this new digital economy. However, the traditional models such as B2C, B2B, and C2B, even those conventional models apply quite well to the new electronic platforms as well. And as more companies start doing business electronically, e-commerce becomes a transboundary business. Therefore, it makes sense to think that international trade agreements apply to e-commerce. You all are familiar with the figures. It's no secret to anyone. Still, I would like to mention some. For example, in 2016, Amazon's profits were $136 billion US. You know that Amazon is one of the biggest global companies operating on the internet, offering goods for sale throughout the world. And there's every reason to believe that Amazon will just keep expanding. In 2017, the profits of another e-commerce giant, Alibaba, was $23 billion US. And as I have mentioned, we have every reason to believe that e-commerce will only grow and more goods and services will be offered on the internet, including such services as healthcare, education services, goods like food and other items. So it is important to regulate e-commerce, to establish a legal framework for this purpose. We have the existing agreements. However, they do not cover all of these new aspects related to e-commerce specifically. There are two international organizations that today play the main role when it comes to discussing e-commerce, and more specifically, to determine to what extent the existing agreements are suitable to regulate e-commerce. And if they're not suitable, how to amend them, how to adjust them. And the two organizations are OECD and WTO. And even these two organizations don't have a common definition of what e-commerce is. Back in 1998, WTO proposed its own definition, which is the production, distribution, marketing, sale, and delivery of goods and services by electronic means. As you can see, this is quite a narrow definition. Production, distribution, marketing, and the rest of it should take place on the internet. 15 years later, in 2013, OECD came up with its own definition, which is much broader. It's the sale of purchase of goods or services conducted over computer networks by a method specifically designed for the purpose of receiving or placing orders. This definition is a bit more flexible. It presumes that some aspects of a transaction may take place on the internet, and others might take place offline, such as delivering the actual goods. The two definitions serve as a foundation for international trade relations. There's a number of agreements already in place that include a provision on e-commerce. They include some regional agreements as well as broader economic partnership frameworks. More than half of all the WTO member countries signed at least one regional agreement with a component on e-commerce. Currently, there are over 60 regional agreements that have a separate chapter on e-commerce, and over 20 regional agreements with some provisions where they don't have a section or a chapter on e-commerce, but they have individual provisions touching upon e-commerce. For example, this is the Comprehensive Regional Economic Partnership, which is an agreement still being developed. There's also an agreement in ASEAN, as well as between ASEAN and the countries with which they have bilateral agreements, such as Australia, China, India, Japan, South Korea, and New Zealand. There is also the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. This is another agreement that contains provisions on e-commerce. What should we bear in mind when it comes to e-commerce? What makes e-commerce different from traditional commerce? What are the things that we should include in a trade agreement to ensure that we properly address e-commerce? Border data flow is one such important area, because access to information, transmitting information is very important when it comes to e-commerce. Because e-commerce platforms such as Amazon or Alibaba, for example, rely on global data flows to enable the consumers to buy goods from those who are selling those goods to them. There aren't that many trade agreements, however, that contain provisions on trans-border data flows. I can cite an example of such an agreement is agreement on trade in goods and services between 23 countries, including EU member states, Canada, and the United States of America, and it covers about 70% of global trade in services. And these services include banking services, healthcare, transportation services. And several signatories of this agreement call to get rid of all restrictions on trans-border data flows. They resist the localization of data. These countries think that the data should travel as freely as possible between countries. Additionally, trans-border data flows affect competition. We all know that if you take a search engine, such as Google, and you enter a search query, the results that you're going to get depend on the algorithms employed by the search engines. And those are based on search queries from consumers. As a result, we have the following situation. Large e-commerce companies such as Amazon and Alibaba, it's very easy for them to be very visible, to have a high profile on the internet. However, if you are a small electronic commerce company, it is much harder for you to raise your profile on the internet. What are some of the other things that are important to keep in mind? One of them is paperless trade. Paperless trade means basically that all of the information that used to be transmitted in hard copy on paper is now transmitted electronically. I'm talking about information related to trade. I'm talking about various types of documents related to placing orders, fulfilling orders, storing various data related to trade transactions. It is also about payments, which are now electronic. It's not just about an individual filling out a form, making an order, and buying a book. It could be transactions between two companies. So the information may include such things as invoices, waybills, and other such paperwork. The same area includes digital authentication, e-signatures, verifying the authenticity of various electronic documents. All these systems should be regulated one way or another. There should be a common denominator of some sort between all the countries that signed a trade agreement. If you are able to use an electronic signature, for example, in one country, but it's not recognized in another, it's a problem. There is an agreement on paperless documentation in the Asia Pacific. It's called the Framework Agreement on Facilitation of Cross-Border Paperless Trade in Asia and the Pacific. Is one such agreement addressing paperless exchange of information. And according to this agreement, the governments in question should establish a framework to make paperless trans-border trade smoother. Intellectual property rights is another area that we need to bear in mind when it comes to e-commerce, because e-commerce facilitates to a larger extent than in the past goods or services that include intellectual property. It could be music, it could be photographs or videos. As a result, you have some unique concepts that we used to not have in conventional trade, such as domain names, for instance. Okay, I will skip over some of the bits of my presentation, and I would like to talk now about the World Trade Organization. I have mentioned WTO before, but I'd like to now talk about parts of WTO that deal specifically with e-commerce. The parts that study existing trade agreements, as well as how they can be adapted in order to regulate e-commerce specifically. In WTO, there are 3 councils and 1 committee. There's a council on trade and services, the Council for Trade and Goods, the Council for Trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights, as well as the Committee on Trade and Development. Each one of those bodies has its own objectives and specific responsibilities for reviewing certain trade agreements, for instance. The Council for Trade and Services is responsible for studying the legal framework of the General Agreements on Trade and Services, which took effect in 1995, when WTO was created. The Council for Trade and Services is tasked to determine to which extent this agreement meets the modern standards. This general agreement on the trade and services is quite neutral when it comes to technology. It does not distinguish between conventional types of trade and e-commerce. The agreement includes 4 types of providing services: transboundary supply, when a service is supplied by one country to another across a boundary; consumption abroad, it's when service is provided by providers who come to a country from another country. It could be students for getting their education, for example, medical treatment, for example. The third type is commercial presence, is when you have a supplier of services from one country. They then open a branch or representative office in another country. However, this branch or representative office is managed from abroad, not locally. Examples include hotels or banks. And the fourth type is when you have a presence of individuals, is when you have representatives of foreign companies who come to your country, for example, when managers or engineers from a company travel to another country and work there. The next body in the WTO is the Council for Trade in Goods, and it studies the aspects having to do with the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. This agreement was signed in 1947 by 23 countries in Geneva. The agreement remained in force until January 1995. This was when WTO was founded. However, the original text of the agreement is still in force. The agreement covers goods classifications, rules of origin for goods, including digital goods. It covers customs duties, etc. The next body, the third body, is the Council for Trade-Related Aspects of Intellectual Property Rights. It deals with issues related to intellectual property, including when it comes to e-commerce, protecting copyright, for example, trademarks. It is easy to guess, therefore, that this council is in close cooperation with World Intellectual Property Organization. And the last committee is the Committee on Trade and Development. And its responsibility is to take account of the economic, financial, and other aspects for development, including development of developing countries and the least developed countries. I now have only a few minutes left, and I will talk a little bit about why all this is important. When we talk about trade, we mainly focus on developed countries, usually, where you have uninterrupted supply of electricity, where the internet connections tend to be very good, where you have enough qualified people in electronic communications, specialists in electronic communications, and they're the countries where incomes are quite high to buy goods and services over the internet. The infrastructure is in a great shape, and there's a high level of trust, payment systems to suppliers of goods and services. However, in developing countries and in the least developed countries, the situation is very different. Let's say there's an international agreement in trade that is signed by both developed countries and developing countries and the least developed countries. Then you might have a problem because the expectations and the abilities of the people in the different countries may be very different. So this Committee on Trade and Development studies the capabilities and the needs of such developing and least developed countries and tries to understand how e-commerce could be used to improve the economic situation in such countries so that e-commerce can benefit the local economies and the local residents. And I think I'll end my speech there. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to take them.
It's okay, I managed to.
Okay.
Well done.
I don't know, do you keep that now? Yeah.
我们在专门学习。
Eu notei alguns pontos que eu queria apontar que eu acho que eu senti que às vezes você estava pensando em falar coisas que alguns todos de comércio internacional. Você falou em relação ao comércio internacional, em relação ao comércio internacional. Aqui devemos incluir signaturas eletrônicas, algumas coisinhas que, obviamente, você não pode fora do padrão, porque você não pode manipulando, é aquele negócio que não é fala muito pra gente. Você tem várias coisas eu tenho muito que você insistiu. Eu acho que eu, você não falou e-commerce? Será que eu falou e-commerce? Uma outra coisa que eu acho que você, além do que eu acho que você é um pouquinho mais de saúde. Às vezes, eu não sei se você lembra ou se você lembra, mas eu vou voltar muito para mim. Começar a fazer algo, não foi seu caso que agora, mas eu falei que porque se você começar a aí tem um ponto positivo sim. Eu gosto que você comece pelo entretanto. Entretanto, porque daí fica mas tem muitas frases que você começa ainda aqui. Ainda que ele é um pouco porque eu fico com ele, você fala muito longe.这理解别人接的应该差不多量级的问题。Quando que a gente vai começar uma frase com a de queijo, faz a frase, e aí se eu colocar, sabe, a objeção, o contraste, eu acho que a minha sugestão outra coisinha que eu anotei que eu preciso que você estava fazendo. Eu não lembro qual é o que eu ia falar isso, mas você falava umas coisas e você achava uma palavra colocar pedidos, você muito inglês, você falou, e a prestar essa atenção, para você se expor. Eu acho que evitar essa repetição, né? E aí, no geral, assim, eu vou te dar um feedback geral. Eu acho que você não ter olhado o tempo, eu achei que você foi um pouquinho ansioso. Então, Isso é ótimo, porque eu sei que para um tempo, então eu vou te dar uma outra sugestão, talvez que não funciona comigo, eu gosto de migrar desde quando você está constantemente, por exemplo, eu achei que nem e eu acho que o jeito de fazer isso é se familiarizar com o assunto. Então, por exemplo, se ele está falando que são muito, você sabe se é isso foi muito difícil, uma vez eu e ela surta, sei lá, no meio da China, que ela sabia, ele ficava um pouco na frente. Mas era muito fácil. Eu saí da cadeia e falei, nossa, isso é ótimo.
Check against the list. Cette fois-ci, j'étais une personne qui Oh, ben, si j'avais fait,
Não, quando ele está querendo passar uma ideia, a gente tem que óbvio você vai um pouquinho e que esse contato seja mais
Oh, d'accord, d'accord. Je vais parler ici, puisque...
Oui.
Je crois que comme j'ai jamais... Ah ben non, 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 ça va, ça. Ok, ben je vais essayer pendant que...
I just wanted to tell you guys that the next page vocabulary is out, so feel free to look at it and to get prepared, and then once you wrap up your feedback, it's going to be in 2 parts.
Ah ouais, moi je vais regarder ça. Non, non, moi j'ai bien regardé.
Por exemplo, É engraçado isso, as edições.
Ale, não. Você viu lá o preto? Super cartão. Oui, c'est mieux dans
Eu acho que
de l'avoir en or, souvent, ça c'est quoi? En réalité,
sabe, eu acho que você vai explicar. O que eu achei difícil é mais o viés que está sendo avaliado e tudo. Mas, aqui é como essa situação, por exemplo. Você pensa no início do então, por exemplo, a gente fazia a gente eles estavam fazendo uma então, para eu praticar a minha perspectiva, eu fazia um tempo daqueles discussão com essa minha depois eu ia para uma parte gravar, fazer e eu via o que eu achava. Nossa, eu tô falando muito eu tô falando muito bem na frase. Então, eu fazia muito essa atividade
and then it's rice, and then there's one more, right?
não existe
So did you all together in the
I
então, eu acho que
yeah. How do we do? Do you want to be together or do you want to? Oh, it's like nice.
primeiro só fazer se ouvir.
But it's like
Depois você vai ver sua festa, você vai ouvir e coloca de você eu abri um negócio um texto com um tanto de pontinhos todas as que você fez você conheceu aí eu marcava assim
I think
This one is not mine. This is yours.
Only one side of the work. This side over here, yeah, I can't really like the work.
that is true.
Yeah, it's just depending on how you do
Or do you want to do the whole thing?
Então, o que eu faço?
You want to practice
Eu
the
vou
real?
então,
I can do just that, but it's better to
tudo que as pessoas me falam, eu vou anotando tudo, porque a gente vai fazer tudo certo, reviver o microfone, consecutivo.
So you're gonna listen to the first half? Alright, I'll listen to the first half.
Eu vou anotando tudo que as pessoas e aí de tanto em tempo,
But I could be in the room.
eu volto.
Alright,
Avoid saying something unless you know what it is.
that'd be fun, yeah. Alright, so should we take a speech but not look at it?
Eu acho que isso aqui me ajuda no
Okay, everyone, we should get started on the first speech. No authority here. Oi, tudo bom? Oi. Okay, it's time to interpret the second speech.
Okay, cool.
I need to.
All right, looks like everyone is almost ready. I'll temporarily be your moderator to set the stage. We will give Fabrice about 1 minute to brief everyone on your speech later. Just to go around the table and make sure we have relay channels set up. Relay channels will be from number 12 and 2. Thank you. Number 2 is 1 relay points in English as here, and number 12 as well. The other, would you like me to assign who takes relay from whom, or
Also,
would you?
I think it's important to mention that the speech will be English and French,
Yes.
so it's important to switch to floor real quick when it's going into English, right? Because like,
You know what?
change
Yes,
from
that's a
relay-
good question. We need to first decide if our boots are unidirectional or bidirectional. How do you feel? What do you want to do? Do you want to do 2 directions? If so, okay. So Paul wants to do 2 directions, meaning that how do we do the switching? If the speaker, this is very real. This is being very real for the market. What's your advice? Because
So
when the
if
speakers,
you can go both directions, anybody who is listening who needs the English all the time is going to have to switch between him and the floor regardless.
yes,
Right?
yes,
I don't think anyone's going to take like it would.
Okay.
When he's going from English into French, the only person that's going to affect is whoever's listening to him, as if he were a French speaker in the audience.
but we realize that there will be a lag.
Yeah.
Usually what happens is you miss a sentence or 2 when that happens. Do we want to do it that way, or do we want to make the boots unidirectional?
No, I think we should replicate real life. So what could happen is, let's say you're a Spanish or Chinese interpreter at a mostly French and English conference, then that's actually what would happen, because the speaker would speak French and English, right? And then whenever the speaker speaks French, you need to rely on your colleagues for relay. And then when you need to realize yourself when it's turned into French, so you need to tune into the floor. So I would actually recommend that you pretend to push the output button to get that reflex going, because that can happen in real life. So because we only have 1 channel, right? In our voice. We don't have to press, but in real life, you actually have to press the button and switch language and keep up on top of like what's going on, what language is being spoken. So essentially, I believe the speech is mostly in French. You'll have relay from booth 12, myself, and booth 2. So you have 2 relay channels to choose from. Ideally, half of you take, or at least 1, so that we all have some feedback. There's 2 relay channels. However, occasionally the speaker will speak English, in which case you have to go back to the floor.
And what will you and he do? You will be quiet when they
No, we
speak.
go into
French.
or our
Right.
French delegates who need it.
Right. True. Okay.
Is that
So our
clear?
boots are bidirectional,
Yeah.
and the relay takers need to switch back to the floor if you suddenly begin to hear French in your relay channel.
It's a little unusual, but it actually happens.
It happens, yes.
Yeah.
Especially in Canada.
Okay.
Are you assigning?
We can assign, let's assign, let's assign.
How about this? How about
We have-
everyone to my right hand side?
She's,
Take relay from number 2.
okay.
Everyone to my left hand side on this side of the room. Number 5, number Ilana.
Number Ilana.
Jonathan. So you guys take relay from number 12.
Awesome. There's some. Fabrice got the printout of the
Yes,
speeches.
last minute.
That's it.
Very
Just
good.
like in real life. So
That's so
grab
cool.
yourself.
Okay.
Well, in real life, it might be, well, we have the speech, but it's confidential, so you can only have it afterwards. I've heard that.
Some French studies of the weekend.
Are there more copies? They're all gone.
No, they're right there.
Oh, what language is the,
There's both.
French and English.
so they're not mixed in the text?
No.
Everyone loves it.
Very
Thank
thoughtful.
you. Wow.
I should probably check one as well. Wow.
No, that's all part.
All right, so now perhaps when everyone settles in, just first use about a minute to brief everyone on the context of this speech and then launch your speech.
In French.
Oh,
Or
for the
in
briefing, could you please do it? in
Yeah,
English?
sure, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Turn on your mic.
So this presentation is a kind of advocacy speech. It's set before the recent NAFTA renegotiation process, and it has to do with the supply management system in Canada's dairy industry, which is mostly located in Quebec. And this is a Canadian exception to international trade rules that it was felt to be quite important politically to maintain in the NAFTA negotiations. So this presentation sets out arguments why this special situation should be maintained and tries to rebut various objections to the supply management system in Canada. Is that a good enough briefing? Okay. Donc, merci. Les pourparlers internationaux commerciaux sont d'une grande importance pour les producteurs laitiers du Canada, eu égard au maintien de l'intégrité du système de gestion de l'offre régissant l'industrie laitière canadienne. La gestion de l'offre continue d'être essentielle à la viabilité et à la durabilité de l'industrie laitière canadienne. Et en tant que système, elle est fortement tributaire de la gestion des importations. En vertu de la gestion de l'offre, les producteurs laitiers canadiens, contrairement à ceux d'ailleurs dans le monde, gèrent collectivement leur production afin de répondre aux exigences du marché, ce qui leur permet d'éviter de produire du lait de surplus pour le vendre à des prix de dumping. Les pourparlers commerciaux, qu'ils se déroulent à l'OMC ou qu'ils soient bilatéraux, ont le potentiel d'influer sur les mesures de gestion des importations, lesquelles jouent un rôle déterminant dans la planification de la production. The Canadian dairy sector was deliberately excluded by the Canadian government under the original NAFTA agreement, and as such was exempt from opening its market. The agreement ensured Canada was able to maintain its obligations under the GATT and WTO, allowing Canada to legally implement and maintain a series of tariff rate quotas, or TRQs, as negotiated and approved in the Uruguay Round Agreement. We assert that the Canadian dairy industry must continue to be excluded from negotiations on the so-called modernization of NAFTA. And more specifically, we insist that the Canadian government reject any discussion regarding the size of TRQs, and the level of over-quota tariffs for dairy products as part of the renegotiation of NAFTA. Nous sommes reconnaissants du soutien continu du gouvernement du Canada et serons ravis de travailler avec lui en vue d'explorer des moyens de maintenir l'intégrité du système de gestion de l'offre dans le contexte de la demande des États-Unis de renégocier l'ALENA. Le secteur laitier canadien est un contributeur important à l'économie canadienne. Le secteur laitier contribue continuellement et de manière positive à la stabilité économique du Canada. En 2015, les contributions économiques du secteur ont généré 19,9 milliards de dollars du PIB du Canada et 3,8 milliards de dollars de recettes fiscales. De plus, le secteur laitier assure le maintien d'environ 221 000 emplois au Canada, tout en fournissant à la population canadienne des produits nutritifs frais et de grande qualité, et ce, sans les subventions directes du gouvernement que reçoit le secteur laitier d'autres pays. Selon les résultats des études sur les retombées économiques menées par EcoRessources, l'industrie laitière demeure un contributeur dynamique de l'économie du Canada. Entre 2009 et 2015, le nombre d'emplois s'est accru de 3%, la contribution aux recettes fiscales a augmenté de 25% et la contribution au PIB de 31%. Under supply management, farmers focus primarily on producing milk to meet domestic demand. However, Canadian dairy farmers remain open to exploring export market opportunities, providing they're profitable and such exports respect Canada's international trade obligations. Furthermore, the relative stability offered under supply management creates a positive and predictable environment conducive to investment and growth. In fact, based on the results of the 2016 Census of Agriculture, Statistics Canada noted that the increased efficiency of the dairy industry is attributed to improvements in feed quality and management, genetics, and advancements in technology, including the use of robotic milking. So without the stability offered by supply management, the significant and ongoing investments required to achieve this increased efficiency might not be possible. In Canada, our farmers derive their returns from the market without any direct government subsidies. Conversely, in the US, the government provides massive support to farmers and the agri-food sector in the form of direct and indirect subsidies. A 2009 study concluded that the US dairy industry benefited from a total of $31 per hectoliter in direct and indirect subsidies funded through taxpayer dollars. The subsidies are administered through programs run by federal and state departments of agriculture, as well as US irrigation programs, which constitute an important component of the total level of support. By contrast, in Canada, dairy farmers do not receive a single dollar of direct government subsidies. De plus, selon une étude réalisée en 2015, le démantèlement du système de gestion de l'offre de l'industrie laitière canadienne entraînerait une diminution de 2,1 à 3,5 milliards de dollars des contributions au PIB, une perte de 24 000 emplois directs, l'incapacité pour jusqu'à 40 à 50% des fermes de couvrir leurs coûts en espèces. Et ce dernier point est particulièrement important parce que le Canada est un pays où il est encore possible d'exploiter une ferme, d'avoir une exploitation agricole, alors que dans la plupart des autres pays avancés, le secteur agricole est devenu une véritable industrie. Non seulement la transformation, mais encore l'exploitation agricole sont aux mains d'immenses entreprises et les producteurs individuels ne sont pas en mesure de gagner leur vie. Cette étude, donc, de 2015, a également révélé que malgré des prix à la production plus faibles, la déréglementation dans d'autres pays a en fait réduit la marge des transformateurs de produits laitiers. De plus, la diminution des prix à la production n'a pas été nécessairement transférée aux consommateurs. Par exemple, en Australie, à la suite de la déréglementation, entre 2004 et 2011, les prix à la consommation du beurre et du fromage ont augmenté annuellement de 4 et 7% respectivement, ce qui est beaucoup plus que le taux d'inflation de l'Australie au cours de la même période, c'est-à-dire 2,9% par an. Dans le contexte actuel de sursaturation des marchés laitiers mondiaux, qui a mené à de faibles prix à la production et à une réduction des prix que reçoivent les transformateurs, la gestion de l'offre est une bouffée d'air frais. De par sa nature, elle permet de garantir que la surproduction est largement évitée et le système permet de réduire significativement l'effet dévastateur des fluctuations du marché, fluctuations qui ont eu des répercussions négatives sur le prix du lait ailleurs dans le monde. Lorsque trop de lait est produit, les prix chutent et les incitatifs à investir dans l'accroissement de la capacité des installations de transformation disparaissent. Cela entraîne des pertes d'emplois, des pertes de revenus pour les producteurs et, dans certains cas, l'obligation pour les producteurs de mettre fin à leur exploitation. Or, non seulement la gestion de l'offre fonctionne-t-elle pour les producteurs laitiers et l'économie du Canada, mais elle est également bénéfique pour les consommateurs canadiens. Si l'on compare les prix à la consommation des produits laitiers au Canada à ceux des États-Unis, il est clair que les produits laitiers ne sont pas nécessairement plus chers au Canada qu'aux États-Unis. En fait, pour certains produits, les prix au Canada sont plus faibles qu'aux États-Unis. Par exemple, pour les 52 semaines se terminant le 27 mai 2017, les consommateurs canadiens ont payé en moyenne 9,34 $ le kilo pour le beurre et 13,90 $ le kilo pour le cheddar, comparativement à 10,71 $ le kilo et 14,87 $ le kilo, respectivement, aux États-Unis. En très grande proportion, le public canadien soutient le système de gestion de l'offre et l'industrie laitière. Le 26 mai 2017, Campaign Research a publié les résultats d'un sondage demandant aux Canadiens s'ils approuvaient ou désapprouvaient la gestion de l'offre. Les résultats sont à la fois clairs et sans équivoque. 75% des Canadiens approuvent la gestion de l'offre. Comme l'a dit le Premier ministre Justin Trudeau, la gestion de l'offre fonctionne pour les agriculteurs, elle fonctionne pour notre industrie agricole et elle fonctionne pour les Canadiens. Let me talk a little bit about dairy trade between Canada and the United States. Under the supply management system, the Canadian dairy industry focuses on production to meet domestic demand requirements. As such, Canadian dairy policies have been introduced in order to respond to domestic needs and market evolutions. Conversely, the US dairy industry is heavily reliant on export markets, with exports representing 14% of US milk production in 2016. And the US is increasingly using the export market to dispose of surplus solids non-fat. So this is a product that is essentially left over from the manufacture of butter, cheese, ice cream, and the like. And disposing of that is a perennial problem for the dairy industry. And the solution that the United States industry is focusing on is dumping it abroad. And the US actually enjoys a favorable dairy trade balance with Canada. In 2016, the US's trade surplus with Canada was the largest it has ever been over the past 10 years. Today, Canada is the second largest export market for US dairy products, surpassed only by Mexico. Il est important de garder en tête également que la valeur du dollar américain n'a généralement pas favorisé les exportations. Or, malgré une hausse de plus de 30% du taux de change, positionnant le dollar canadien à environ 1,30 $ par dollar américain, la balance commerciale continue de s'accroître en faveur des États-Unis. En fait, en 2016, les États-Unis ont bénéficié d'un excédent commercial de plus de 400 millions de dollars canadiens avec le Canada en ce qui concerne les produits laitiers. Et finalement, aux États-Unis, les exportations de produits laitiers sont également soutenues par des programmes tels que Cooperatives Working Together, ou CWT, un programme lancé en 2004 et coïncidant avec la hausse rapide des exportations des États-Unis. Selon CWT, le programme consiste en une redevance volontaire, entre guillemets, bien qu'il semble que les membres des coopératives n'aient pas vraiment la possibilité de se retirer. D'ailleurs, voici les modalités de retrait qu'on retrouve dans le règlement intérieur de CWT sur le site de l'organisation. Alors, sur le site de CWT, lorsqu'il est question de la possibilité des coopératives de se retirer, on peut lire. So, withdrawal. Unless otherwise approved by the CWT committee, a CWT member may only terminate its CWT membership during any one-year term upon the discontinuance of the CWT program, except that a producer may also terminate its CWT membership if it sells its entire herd of dairy cows during such term. Permission to withdraw may be granted or denied by the CWT committee. Alors, on peut voir que le caractère volontaire de cette redevance est tout relatif puisqu'il est assez difficile aux producteurs de se retirer de ce système. En d'autres termes, CWT est un moyen de subventionner l'exportation de produits laitiers américains. Je vais passer à présent à la deuxième moitié de mon propos pour avancer un certain nombre d'arguments. Tout d'abord, la gestion de l'offre ne fait pas obstacle au commerce. Comme on l'a mentionné ci-dessus, la balance commerciale en ce qui concerne les produits laitiers favorise grandement les États-Unis. Actuellement, environ 10% de la demande canadienne est satisfaite par l'entremise de produits laitiers importés, dont une grande partie, comme je le disais tout à l'heure, fait l'objet d'un dumping par les États-Unis sur le marché canadien. En comparaison, aux États-Unis, seulement 3 à 4% de la demande intérieure est satisfaite par les importations en provenance de tout pays. Ainsi, en plus de respecter ses engagements commerciaux internationaux, le Canada permet aux produits américains hautement subventionnés d'entrer sur le marché canadien et de faire concurrence à notre production intérieure. Lorsque les politiciens américains parlent de, entre guillemets, commerce fiable, ouvert et équitable, ils se basent sur leur propre interprétation unique de ce que signifie fiable, ouvert et équitable. Justement, le commerce équitable suppose des règles du jeu équitables. Le soutien accordé au secteur agricole des États-Unis par l'entremise de subventions gouvernementales, directes et indirectes, exclut de toute évidence les règles du jeu équitable. Et cette situation n'est pas près de changer. Parlons un peu du protectionnisme américain. S'il est vrai que le système de gestion de l'offre du Canada dépend de la gestion des importations, afin de répondre adéquatement à l'ensemble de la demande intérieure, tout en limitant les surplus de production, il importe de mentionner que les États-Unis limitent également leurs importations de lait par l'entremise de contingents tarifaires, ou CT, rendant leur industrie tout aussi protectionniste, voire plus que celle du Canada. Les États-Unis disposent en tout de 24 contingents tarifaires pour les produits laitiers, comparativement à 12 seulement pour le Canada. Et ce n'est pas tout. Les deux pays ont conservé leur droit d'appliquer des mécanismes de sauvegarde spéciale, ou MSS, de l'OMC, mais contrairement aux États-Unis qui invoquent régulièrement le recours au MSS, le Canada ne l'a jamais fait. Lorsqu'il est question d'allégations de protectionnisme portées contre le Canada, il ne faut pas oublier que des politiques similaires et dans certains cas plus strictes sont en place pour certaines industries des États-Unis dites sensibles, dont celle des produits laitiers et du sucre. Pour conclure, comme je l'ai mentionné, la gestion de l'offre est bénéfique pour le Canada puisqu'elle favorise la création d'emplois et l'innovation et contribue grandement au PIB et aux recettes fiscales du Canada. Selon l'ensemble des données disponibles, il est incontestable que le Canada présente un déficit commercial par rapport aux États-Unis en ce qui concerne les produits laitiers. Deuxièmement, la production laitière canadienne est axée sur le marché intérieur et a pour objectif de satisfaire la demande intérieure. Et troisièmement, l'industrie laitière canadienne respecte et a la ferme intention de continuer de respecter les accords commerciaux internationaux existants et les règlements qui y sont associés. Je vous remercie de votre attention.
We had thought we were going to give
Oh, I see. I did say at one point I'm going to the second part of that. Oh, but did you want me to wind up or make a call?
Usually the way we did it was she said, okay, part one.
Oh, I see. Okay. Oh, I see. I get it. Oh, okay. I thought you were going to wind up.
Well, your question was
okay. Okay. Okay, I did say that, but I guess maybe.
Yeah.
clearly enough.
Yeah,
Okay.
because logistically, we will
It was a nightmare.
Oh.
I don't know if anyone can do it, just
Overall,
I know it was worse. Но он читал,
с этим оборудованием, так, на двух языках, это невозможно. Потому что иначе бы... Тот, кто до этого постоянно на линии слушать, был бы... А здесь же нельзя так. Нереально.
Я взяла начало, я потом дальше начала представлять
Я небольшой фанат такого.
Okay. Yeah.
Не надо. Просто время.
Oh, yeah, of course. We were fast.
Sometimes we couldn't see it, but it wasn't clear how we could see what came before, what came after. And if that's sweet, I have to figure out how to connect this.
Looks like you didn't even use your text.
No, I didn't.
你只听我，他只听你我听了你的，但是我没有考虑。没有，我上马上也是拿那个，本来你可以
It was Oh, I know. And they're all the and you're like,
我的本来是要接写的活动，他是正好换过来出来讲，我这是游戏来自
very closely. And that's why we're so awesome to use them.
你是有看这个吗？还是我在我没有看这个，后面看了2个视频。我觉得也是这样的一个标准。
Did you guys do that? We were fast.
因为我一开始
Oh, yeah. If not, I would have.
没有办法，其实我觉得我想去找的时候，我觉得我找到的菜有点给我自己，他有一块说的超级快，然后就是一连串的叠在一起。我觉得他有很大，他是不是有一个人搞的？我就不知道他是那一块。我在体验我的
It makes sense. I think it makes sense. This means the percentage of increase. No. The increase is $2 billion. Drop down.
因为它有一些那个准备这个，所以我觉得有一些词对卡壳了，想到了那个对，所以说到我就觉得其实那个写过好多理论，然后我觉得有几次都在想这个还有那个然后大家麦子感觉就是各种我觉得那些词好写下来，写下来，然后有一个一定的说法，就很快，然后就开始想，我发现他那没身体，还有一些这个processing 啊，是一个秘密。
That's what you meant.
就是一些词完在那的话，但是如果没有那个词的话，没有准备的话，就没有。差不多吧，我觉得就是还是准备的。就是因为
He was reading word by word. When he read, he read. And then he would read again. And that was like, that's it. Yeah. I don't think I gave enough time to do scripture in language. Yeah. They don't want to play. Yeah. Because whoever is going to give yeah. And they switch the channel. Yeah, normally for the channel. And then because there were some times where it was like non-stop. She's just like 1 second in the first one. Like, yes.
Você quer? A gente tem aquelas mantinhas, tira a foto. Eu nem trouxe todos os cadernos. Mas eu tenho vários.
All right. So now it's time for
Party line. I think he might. I think he's gonna say party line. I bet. Exactly. That's exactly what I thought. Oh.
拿的是比较价格。
Brasileiro. Eu não sei se...
对，尤其是数字方面，其实就可以看到。看的不会方便。
没几个，没说等会儿。
而且后来我听那个香美，他说的普通话的那个说话挺好说。对，我觉得他这儿。
这个有老年数字的问题都有搞，只要都可以上传。
我录音有上一块说这个，现在才看一个这个，他说哎27了，对我这样是我也打嗝了，没有这个，就是很的，没到，对。
你想找个人把这个念一遍，然后跟他念的，我再录。
你回自己。
Eu não sei como que é o seu motivo. Eu sempre gostei de você. Sempre gosto técnica. Eu gosto de muito. E lá na empresa corre lá que eu seguro.
E é do longo do
Então, eu desenvolveu. Você aprende tudo, mas você precisa praticar para conseguir. Hoje eu acho que eu sou melhor. Eu faço mais com sentido. Esse negócio é mágico. cara tá falando um negócio de engenharia digital, 3 minutos, eu tô 4 minutos, sim. Aí ele olha pra mim e fala, posso? Ele pode? Aí eu falo,
觉得我没有那个兴趣。
完全没准备过稿，而且我真的我毕业之后就基本就没翻译过，就是因为我在等译嘛，然后就很 rusty。